dragon on the play date with your dragon. You know, we are live. We're live right now.
Yeah, I'm just working on camera position. Alright, your goal.
I'm gold. Alright. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Joeseph Campbell Study Group at the World of Witches Museum. I'm Melissa. I'll be reading this group. I hope some of you out there have actually read the first chapter, the introduction, which is sort of a 4-chapter introduction. I did not realize that when I assigned it. I'm terribly sorry. But we're all big boys and girls, and I'm sure we can get through it. And if not, I have lots of questions that I prepared for the inevitability that nobody read it but me. Which tends to happen in these kinds of groups. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the power of myth. Of the Hero of 1,000 Faces. I also tend to read the wrong book when it's not assigned, but I did read the right one this time. And we're going to talk at first about the idea of the monomyth, which is what the first chapter of the prologue is about. We'll prologue up. It's a pretty picture of Medusa. So the idea of the monomyth is essentially that all of the myths in the world convey one story. They're all sort of retellings of the same central idea. Maybe a little excerpt for you. It was here with me because this is not there's a line that he quotes in the preface to the original 1945 edition, which was included in my edition, where he quotes the Hindi Vedas. Written in those is that truth is one, the sage speaks it by many names. And what that essentially means is that each myth and each story is a different way of conveying the same truth. So in Prologue of the Monomyth, the first chapter is the myth and dream. And in this chapter, Campbell talks a lot about psychoanalysis. For those of you who don't know, psychoanalysis is a lot of it has to do with the practice of interpreting your dreams, because dreams are basically the mind and subconscious replaying things, processing them, and figuring them out. So your dreams can say a lot about what you're going through and what you have been through in the past in your childhood. Now, this isn't dream interpretation for psychic purposes like seeing the future, so much as seeing the present in the past. One of the ways Campbell expresses myth is that myth, he says, it would not be too much to say that myth is the secret opening through which the inexhaustible energies of the cosmos pour into the human cultural manifestation. So basically, this is not the first quote. What he means by that is that religion, philosophy, arts, and social forms all basically span from the myth to modern myth. This could be anything from religion to art and architecture to even video games, as Danielle would have pointed out if she was here. And all of these things sort of spring from the modern myth. And when the modern myth isn't present, and people don't really have this mythological background to draw from, they instead draw from belief. So one of the examples that Campbell gives of a dream is the microphone. So you can actually hear me. Isn't that nice? One of the examples that he gives is this dream that was from, I believe, a therapy session that Freud had, a psychoanalysis session with patients. And this is the patient describing the dream. I dreamed from an American youth who was the author of a syndicated newspaper feature. I'm sorry, I guess I'll put out for ground below, calling me. I turned, suddenly to hear him better, and as I did so, the hammer slipped out of my hands and slid down the sloping roof and disappeared over the edge. I heard a heavy thud as of a body falling. Terribly frightened, I climbed down the ladder to the ground. There was my father lying dead on the ground, with blood all over his head. I was broken-hearted and began calling my mother in the midst of my sobs. She came out of the house and put her arms up around me. "Never mind, son, it was an accident," she said. "I know you will take care of me, even if he is gone." And she was kissing me, and I woke up. I'm now sketching it and squeamishness aside. Does this sort of cycle of stories sound familiar to anyone? The idea of the son killing his father and taking his place with his mother. Oedipus Rex! Thank you, Fox Club. Oedipus Rex. That is right. So essentially what this person's dream was doing was following the mythological cycle. The same sort of archetypical cycle as Oedipus myth. Now, for those of you who don't know the story of Oedipus, basically what happened was that the king and queen of 2 minutes, and I'll remember the name of the kingdom. Was it Thebes? The king and queen of Thebes, so just take me a second to remember, had a baby boy. And upon this boy's birth, it was prophesied that he would kill his father and marry his mother. And that's horrible. We need to stop this. So they sent the boy out into the wilderness, assuming he was going to die, but he wasn't. He was raised, and he grew to manhood and decided one day to go and seek out his fortune. And in doing so, he came to Thebes, the rest. He came to, on the road to Thebes, he met, put it down. He met a great man on a chariot, and the man refused to move because he had a very big ego. And apparently big egos are hereditary, because that was Oedipus' father. And Oedipus accused two, and the two of them dueled, and he killed his father. He got to Jaffa, heard that the queen had been murdered on the throne. Oh, I thought that was awful. Didn't realize that the man on the road was his father. Went, talked to the queen. He got an audience with the queen because he saved the kingdom by doing his thing. So he did all these heroic deeds, saved the queen, took care of her, and married her. And then she found out 20 years down the road when he had 4 kids with her and all hell broke loose. But the point is, the idea of a person, once again, the sketchiness aside, there is a greater symbolism to this. Basically, the idea of for men replacing your father, or for women replacing your mother, growing to adulthood, and then finding a figure that can replace your relationship, replacing the previous relationship with the father with a relationship with a wife/mother figure. And this is all Freudian psychology. It always had to do with sex.
Well, that kind of makes sense, thinking of the idea that you always hear the saying, a woman always marries a man like her father, and vice versa, kind of whatever, with the son marrying his mother.
Yeah, you always marry people like your parents, and essentially you're looking to replace, duplicate, or somehow recreate that initial relationship from your childhood. And this is sort of an example of how psychoanalysis and myth follow the same basic path. The cycles of dreams are very similar to the cycles of myth, because they're basically all different ways of hashing out the same thing. Dreams are basically hashing out these ideas on a personal level. Myths are hashing out these ideas and working them out on a cultural level. Now, another thing Campbell talks about a lot. I wrote down this joke that came to mind upon reading this. A man spends the first 9 months of his life trying to get out of a woman's vagina, and the rest of his life trying to get back in. And that basically sums up what Freud and Campbell are getting at. I'm allowed to say stuff like this on this, right? We're PG-13? PG-13. We're PG-13. Okay. That was PG-13 enough.
You're a babysitter. You should be a little bit more tactful than this.
This is how I'm getting it out of my, this is how I tolerate being a babysitter.
Boy.
Well, he's an 8-year-old boy. He's not that one yet. But anyway, I will not be showing him this video. Gummy bear ritual maybe, but not this video. And basically, the difference between the crazy person and Oedipus, as Campbell puts out, is the person who acknowledges these dreams and says, yeah, but that's something I'll never do, and moves on. Whereas Oedipus and his family basically, or his family anyway, basically obsessed about the idea of their son sleeping with their mother, and it drove them nuts and drove them to the whole situation. And as the prologue begins for Oedipus, or at least this is a part of Oedipus, for many a man has seen himself in dreams, his mother's maid, and he who gives no heed to such matters, there's easier fate. So basically, the point of dreams and of myths is getting things out of your system, so that you can metaphorically and experience these things without having to actually do them. Just as, you metaphorically pass through, as you get further in the hero's journey, metaphorically play the dragon and get the balloon that you can bring back to save your people without actually having to go out and find a dragon.
Kind of in a similar vein as the early Greek theater?
Yes, exactly. Greek mystery plays. And what I'd like to do in future classes is actually bring in some mystery plays, post them online, maybe even save one, which would be kind of cool. We talked a lot about that in later chapters. Yeah, it's insane. Using theater to express things that people can't exactly experience themselves. Catharsis, which is in this, I'm getting to catharsis as well.
Yeah!
Catharsis is this stuff. As long as you have a box of tissues. And actually, if you want, we can skip right ahead to that. I'm not really set on doing this in any specific way. I was going to share the story of the Minotaur, but I think we've all been scarred so I cannot this evening. For any of you who are familiar with the story of the Minotaur.
Lots of people get eaten.
And there's I'm sure all of you can figure out how you get a half man, half wolf. And we're leaving it at that. We're going to skip ahead to chapter 2, which is tragedy and comedy, since catharsis was brought up by Sophocles. And it's one that I'm more familiar about. If many of you have been reading along, you probably, are there any comments about what we were talking about before? No? Okay. Come on, people, help me out here. So this is the chapter that I probably have the least trouble with. It's a bit of a difficult book. But this is, and if you're struggling with it, you're not alone. And that's why we have the forums on the Witch Schools and Young Witches site, so we can all go on and sort of work through this together, because I do recognize that it is difficult. So, the idea of catharsis and comedy, essentially, are that the plays are there to get us to experience these things, the emotions of things, without actually having to experience them themselves. Gilbert Murray describes catharsis in his introduction to Aristotle's Poetics, which is basically a book on the theory of plays and drama and use of emotion in them. Basically, he says that catharsis, i.e. the purification or purgation of the emotions of the spectator of a tragedy through the experience of pity and terror, corresponds to an earlier ritual, catharsis, or the purification of the community from the sense of guilt. Here. And that is basically a lot of psychological mumbo-jumbo for saying that we all need to get things out of our system. And my favorite example of this is the show Grey's Anatomy. Melissa, what does Grey's Anatomy have to do with Greek philosophic theory? Well, a very dear friend of mine and I have this argument. Whenever I'm depressed, I curl up on the couch with a box of chocolate and watch Grey's Anatomy. And I get really emotional and really teary-eyed because I am a woman. And I'm generally emotional about things like that. And this friend, when he is emotional and feeling down, will curl up